Hi, welcome back. As part of our five muscles you think you're training but you're not series, one of the muscles that we see trained a lot in a little different way are hamstrings. And hamstrings are one of those things that everybody feels like their hamstrings are too tight or too loose or whatever. And it's something that is a muscle that's big in training and it's big in rehab. And we think it's often treated in a way that's maybe not the best way to be treated. Here I've got a nice video from Lori. She's going to go through why your hamstrings might either feel too tight or too long and what that actually means. Because it's not probably the hamstring that we need to look at. It's the position that that hamstring is in. And so Lori's going to do a great job kind of going through the basics of it, and she'll give you an idea of the mechanics behind hamstring. And what we're going to do here is a little bit different. So if you're having hamstring issues, listen to this video from Lori. And if you have any questions, give us a call. Thanks.
Hey everybody, I wanted to talk to you today about hamstrings, and this is a topic that, as a runner and someone that is 51, as I've grown up, we've always been told people if something is tight to stretch it out. And that is a common mentality, especially with our hamstrings. And I want to talk to you how important it is for the hamstrings to be between 85 to 90 degrees. We don't want them to be tight, and we don't want it to be excessive, because either one tells us that the pelvis isn't in the correct biomechanical position. And I want to talk about this as we're gearing up here in Lincoln for hopefully we're going to be having our Lincoln Marathon in May, and as people are starting to gear up with their training, and a lot of times runners will experience tension with their hamstrings, but sometimes it's not just because they're tight, but it's also because they are overstretched. So if I could give you guys one tip as you're training for whatever you're passionate about with working out or riding a bike or running or playing basketball, is not to overstretch your hamstrings. Your hamstring is a muscle, and this muscle attaches here. This is called the ischium of your pelvis. And that hamstring comes down and it attaches on either side of your knee. And a lot of people know that your hamstring helps you to bend your knee, and it also helps you to be able to extend your hip when you're walking or running. But a lot of people fail to realize that the hamstring also helps to keep your pelvis upright. And we want to keep this pelvis in a mid-range. We don't want it to come forward. We also don't want you to over-tack. So a lot of times in our clinic, we have people do a slight pelvic tilt to keep the pelvis upright and neutral. If the pelvis is upright and neutral and you have a good, healthy relationship and good tension in your hamstrings, your straight leg raise should be between 85 to 90 degrees. This would be a healthy tension of your hamstring muscles on both the left and the right side. If your hamstrings are below 85 degrees and they are too tight, the reason for that tension isn't because you need to stretch out your hamstrings. It is because your pelvis is falling forward. And when your pelvis falls forward, if your hamstring attaches here, it's going to make your hamstrings with the attachment site here on the ischium and down here on either side of your knee. If this is falling forward, that's going to make your hamstring appear to be tight. And so what that means is that you've got to actually turn your hamstring muscle on by doing a slight posterior pelvic tilt, and I'll give you an example of what we do here in our clinic to get this in a good position. If your hamstrings are also overstretched, meaning that some of my dancers and gymnasts or even athletes have hypermobility of their hamstring, it's because they were probably once here and they were very tight and they got told to stretch out their hamstring. And now they're going to have hamstrings that are overly tight. Again, that reasoning for that is because the pelvis is falling forward. And now not only do I have a hamstring, a pelvis is falling forward, but now I have a hamstring that is lengthened and weak. When the straight leg raise is below 80 or 85 degrees, the pelvis isn't in the right position, but not necessarily because the hamstring is weak, neurologically weak. When the hamstring can get over 90 degrees, and we can do the splits, Not only now do I have a pelvis is falling forward, just like when it's tight, but this hamstring is weak and isn't able to keep the pelvis upright. So in this position, whether your hamstring is short or whether it's excessive, we get people that overwork their back. We get people that overwork their hip flexors. We can create more tension in a calf or foot and ankle because people have to get their power and push from somewhere other than from their glutes and their pelvis. Because their pelvis is in the right position, muscles are not going to be in the right position for you to get your power and push from your glutes. And people are going to substitute with their back, hip flexors, calf, or in some situations even a neck. And so what we do in our clinic when I have patients that come in with an excessive straight leg raise or with one that is short, we do what we call a 90-90 hip lift. So we have patients that we will have them lay on their back and we'll put a ball between their knees. And I'm not going to go through all of the details because this video is meant for education, not to treat anybody. But we'll have patients take a breath of air in through their nose, and when they breathe out, they're digging their heels down as they roll their pubic bone towards their head, keeping their back on the table and keeping their tailbone off the table. This is a PRI, postural restoration technique, and it helps to engage the hamstrings back here, and it helps to keep the pelvis in a neutral position. If I lift up too high, my back comes up off the table, now I'm over tucking. And if I can't lift my tailbone up off the table, my back is still arched, I'm still not, my pelvis is still too far forward. I feel like I'm telling you the story of the three bears. I don't want baby bear, back arched, and I don't want an over tucked papa bear. I want mama bear. I'm going to dig my heels down. We'll call this a pelvic tilt. Tailbone is off the floor, low back is on the floor, heels are digging back into my shoe. I'm not pushing into the wall. And I should feel the muscles in the back of my thigh engage. This is turning your hamstrings on in a healthy way. Because remember, your hamstrings also help to keep your pelvis upright. I hope this makes sense. I hope this is a healthy tip of the day. Don't overstretch hamstrings.